President, please be seated. The court is now in session. Today, the chamber will continue hearing the testimony of Kang Gik Yew alias Jie Siu Hiang. Please report the attendance of the parties and other individuals at today's proceedings. Greffier. Mr. President, for today's proceeding, all parties to this case are present, except co-defense counsel for Mr. Kieu Sampong, the National Co-Counsel, is absent due to personal reasons. Mr. Nguyen Chie is present in the holding cell downstairs. He has waived his right to be present in the courtroom. The waiver has been delivered to the greffier. A witness who is here today is Kang Gik Yew alias Deutsch. He is now already in this courtroom, Mr. President. President, thank you. Ms. Jie Siu Wang. The chamber now decides on the request by Nguyen Chie. The chamber has received a waiver from Nguyen Chie dated 9 June 2016, which states that due to his headache, back pain, he cannot sit or concentrate for long, and in order to effectively participate in future hearings, he requests to waive his right to participate in and be present at the 9 June 2016 hearing. Having seen the medical report of Nguyen Chie by the duty doctor for the accused at the ECCC dated 9 June 2016, who notes that Nguyen Chie has back pain when he sits for long and dizziness while moving, recommends that the chamber grant him his request so that he can follow the proceedings remotely from the holding cell downstairs. Based on the above information and pursuant to Rule 81.5 of the ECCC internal rules, the chamber grants Nguyen Chie his request to follow today's proceedings remotely from the holding cell downstairs via audio-visual means. Every unit personnel are instructed to link the proceedings to the room downstairs so that Nguyen Chie can follow the proceedings that applies to the whole day. Before giving the floor to the International Deputy Co-Prosecutor to resume the questioning, the chamber would like to remind Kang Gik Yew, the witness, that you should respond in a slower manner compared to yesterday, so that the interpretation can the interpretation team can fully interpret what you say. That can assist our proceedings. And now the floor is given to the co-prosecutor, the deputy co-prosecutor, to resume the questioning. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, Your Honors, Counsel. Good morning, Mr. Kang Gik Yew. We were talking about interrogations and some general questions about interrogations at S21. There are a number of confessions that are in evidence in this case, and many of them are several hundred pages long, involving interrogations that lasted many months. You've talked yourself about the confessions being long documents. Can you tell us why S21 confessions tended to be long documents that required weeks or months of interrogation?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Prosecutor. The longest confession, to my recollection, was Koi Thuan's he was interrogated 4 times under the instruction of the upper echelon. That was the instruction to me. Later on, I was informed by Sun Sen that the 3rd confession did not implicate anyone, but the 4th did implicate others. So it depended on the upper echelon whether or not the interrogation should be conducted for a long period of time or not. That was the longest confession. And the second one was Chan Chakrai's confession, and the confession were long because of the instruction by the upper echelon. So interrogation were conducted long or short, depended on the upper echelon.
How long would it usually take to interrogate a prisoner, prepare the documents, have them reviewed by you or your superiors, and until you had a final confession? How long did that process usually take?
As I told you, some time we needed a long time to obtain the confession, but on some other, concerning some other prisoners, we did not need to spend much time. There was a confession which was not full, the confession of Sơn Sari. So I cannot tell you how many days that the interrogation needed to be conducted to obtain a short confession or a long confession. And I gave you an example already about the longest confession of Koi Thuan.
Thank you. Referring to the period after Koi Thuan's confession in early 1977 through to the purge of the Eastern Zone in mid-1978, a period in which the purges were rather intense. How many prisoners were usually at S-21 on a given day during that period from early 1977 to mid-1978?
Mr. Prosecutor, I am now discussing about internal purges. The prisoners who came in a large number after the confessions of Koi Thuan may have been arrested in 1976 or 77, and then he started to confess, which was recorded, and the confession we obtained from him was on 29 December, and the intensified arrest of a prisoner started to happen after December. That was in January the next year. It was when the internal purges started to happen. And this is what I told the investigating judges as well, that I was so pity on those people, those who regarded me as a brother, were killed at S21. I believe this is a bit beyond the question put to me. That was the arrest of people from the north. And after the arrest of the north, the arrest of the west happened, and then the east, and then northwest. And lastly, the arrests started to happen in the east in June 1978. And as far as you are concerned, I heard that the resistance happened as well at the zone. So this was the process that purges started to happen as I described.
And during this period, my question was, what was the maximum capacity of S21, the prison at Tuol Sleng at the Poignet Yat College? How many prisoners could it hold? And during that intense purge period, how many prisoners were usually there at any given time?
Mr. Co-Prosecutor, I cannot tell you for sure how many prisoners Poignet Yat Lycée could house. Ho would have known about the maximum capacity of S21 to hold the prisoners, and that was the obligation and duties of Ho, and I myself did not have the information.
Mr. President, with your leave, I'd like to provide at this time to the witness document E3/2164, E3/2164, which contains one of the daily counting lists of prisoners for 25 October 1977.
Yes, please, said the President.
Mr. Witness, to refresh your memory on this, we've had handed to you one of the daily counting lists of prisoners. This is for the date of 25 October 1977. And if you look at the totals, you will see that at the start of the day there were 986 prisoners. 6 were taken out during the day, leaving a balance of 980. Does that refresh your memory at all, Mr. Witness? Was it during the period of these intense purges, were there usually 1,000 prisoners, or at least 1,000 prisoners at S21?
Mr. Co-Prosecutor, the number could reach 1,000. That is based on my estimate, but I do not have the accurate figure for you. I did not concentrate on the number of prisoners per time. The number could not be more than 1,000, or perhaps it was a little bit more than 1,000, but not up. It did not reach up to 2,000. And as far as you are concerned, the list of prisoners purged at S21 were around 12,700, and that number, that figure was depicted on the wall or board of S21.
We'll come back later to the total number of prisoners over the lifetime of S21. One more question about the numbers. During the period of these purges, when there were 1,000 or more prisoners at S21 at any time, how many of those 1,000 prisoners could you actually interrogate? Did you have the ability to interrogate all of them, or did you have to pick the most important prisoners to interrogate?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Prosecutor. This is a good question. As far as you are concerned, Mr. Co-Prosecutor, some prisoners went through a long interrogation, but some others were interrogated for a short period of time. And majority of prisoners were sent to Trường Ác to be killed without interrogation. Why? We kept some prisoners because we were expecting that there was one day the upper echelon would advise us to interrogate any particular prisoners. So to keep prisoners at S21 depended on the willingness of prisoners, whether they were willing to confess. Some prisoners, as I said, were not interrogated. Some went through a long interrogation, but some other were interrogated for a short period of time. This is what I can tell you.
I want to turn now to the issue of some questions about the use of torture during interrogations. You've testified extensively in the past on this subject, and in particular about 4 methods of torture that were used at S21. Can you tell us what were the methods of torture that were used by the interrogators at S21?
I did not go to observe or supervise the actual interrogation by interrogators, but I did hold the training session for interrogators. The interrogation usually started with a cold method that was to find the weaknesses of prisoners in order to obtain information from the prisoners. And the aggressive method or hot method was to inflict torture. During the training sessions, during the hot method or aggressive method, I instructed the interrogators not to beat the prisoners. They had to review the confession in order to try to get more information. And as for chewing method, I observed that Sichai alias Tum was stubborn and he did not confess. So at the time I removed Pon to do other tasks since he was so busy and engaged in his job, and Tui came to continue the interrogation after him. And after a few days, I called my superior to ask anyone to come and collect the confession, for example, once in every 2 or 3 days. And my superior usually follow up with the confessions that I sent to him or them.
What I wanted to focus on now was the methods, the ways in which prisoners were subjected to torture. You've identified before 4 methods. Do you remember at the start of operations of S-21 having discussions with Nat and your superiors about the methods of torture that would be used at S-21?
I already told the court during the investigation stage that my first job or task was to hold a training session, and initially I was instructed to interrogate workers from paper mill, that is K5 factory. That factory was located at Chaang Re. Former workers from that factory some of them were interrogated by me, and later on I held the training session for cadres of 703, and during that time staff members from M13 were allowed to interrogate prisoners as well. So I held the training session about the methods, although sometimes I did not meet interrogator frequently. I always advise my interrogators about the methods of interrogation, and I did not go to instruct the interrogators at the ground, on the ground, but I indeed held the training session for interrogators. Yesterday I talked briefly about this issue. Any prisoner who had beaten the important prisoner to that concerned interrogator would have been arrested in replacement of the dead prisoner.
Let me read to you, Mr. Witness, an excerpt from your OCIJ statement, E3/454, E3/454, Khmer ERN 001466662, English 001476604, French 001499925. This is what you said in this statement. Quote, "Since Nat's era, there were 4 types of torture that were used with the approval of Son Sen. 1, beating the detainees with a stick. Number 2, electroshocks. Number 3, covering the head with a plastic bag to suffocate. And number 4, covering the mouth and nose with a towel and pouring cold water from a kettle. The method that was used the most was beating with a stick, because other methods led to time wasting. And the electroshocks were very dangerous for the victims. Question: by your responses, you seem to know the detail. Answer: I never participated in person, but I know through reading the reports. End of a quote. Does this refresh your memory about the 4 methods of torture that were used? And can you tell us, you said in this statement that these methods of torture were used with the approval of Son Sen. How did you know that?
These methods had been used by me since I'm 13. These methods were instructed by Won, and initially I only beat the prisoners, and later on Won came to tell me that he could not assist me in the using of methods, and I was instructed also to touch on the necks of the prisoners or observe the pulse on the necks of the prisoners to make sure that the prisoner were afraid of or not. As for that, he preferred using electroshocks by the manual telephone. And there was another method, was to pour the water onto the prisoner. That method was used since Lon Nol's time. Then, on later occasion, I talked about these methods with Son Sen, and he agreed to those methods. But once again, as I indicated to you, that any prisoners who beat the important prisoners to that interrogator would be arrested. I thank you very much for reading the statement to me. I did not recall the issue only when you brought it up that I could recall it now.
Another part of the same statement that I just read to you, you indicated at the end that one of the reasons you knew about the methods of torture was through reading reports. What reports were you referring to?
The reports concerned the enemy's confessions, and the reports usually included that this particular prisoner was interrogated and tortured. Sometimes Comrade Pon during the interrogation of Mansan Alashia, the second person in the general staff, who later went to be a secretary of the Northeast. I, together with Bonner, was doing our utmost to interrogate Ya. And in the confession, he stated that he had conducted communication from time to time, and the confession was included in the contemporaneous documents, as you can see now today. During the investigation stage, the report of Deutsch was presented to me by the co-investigating judges that Tui forced the prisoner to eat excrement. And at the time, I told the investigating judges that I did not like reading Tui's report because there were many issues raising in Tui's reports. Also, during the investigation stage, the co-investigating judges asked me whether or not the superior upper echelon allowed the torture to be inflicted, and my response was that yes, and that could be seen in the reports.
Let me follow up on that, and you may be referring to the next statement I wanted to ask you about. This is a written statement from you titled "About Physical Torture During Interrogations," document E3/442, specifically paragraph 79. You made the following statement, and you cited as examples reports relating to the interrogations of two people, Sing Poi and Num Sim. And this is what you said, quote, "Physical torture was mostly inevitable. It was a permitted tactic. It was the," and it's written here, police, but perhaps it was intended to be policy, but police well known by the party. Physical torture was employed at all Sandoval offices. Otherwise, the party would not inform S21 to employ such techniques. And as I mentioned, you specifically referenced two confession or reports on confessions in making the statement. I'd like to show those to you now, with your leave, Mr. President. Document E3-1869 is a report relating to the interrogation, confession of Num Sim, alias Sut, who was a member of a battalion in Central Zone Division 174. And E3-1894 is a report or summary on the confession of Sing Poi, alias Sun Sin, a cadre from Sector 4 of the Northwest Zone. So that's E3-1869 and E3-1894. With your leave, may I submit these to the witness?
President, yes, you may proceed.
And I'd specifically like to refer you to the reports or summaries that appear at the start of these documents. The report for Nim Sim appears at Khmer pages 001752. And Your Honors, if we could display these on the screen also with your leave. In the report, the first report I handed to you for the cadre from Division 174, this is E3 1869, Khmer ERN 0017252, English 00837 French 0076983. In a section of the report titled Clarification on My Questioning, the interrogator states, and I quote, "First, I asked him for his previous background and the overt situation. After that, I tortured him until he confessed that he worked as a spy and a CIA network." And in the second, similarly, in the second report or document I've handed to you relating to the cadre from the Northwest, and if we could show these on the screen. The excerpt on the screen now is the one that I just read from the Nim Sim, the Central Zone cadre. And then if we could show the next excerpt is from the Northwest Zone cadre, document E3 1894, Khmer ERN 00005360, English 0070285, French 0074732. If we could put that on the screen. In that report, it reads, quote, "When we started torturing, he agreed to confess by telling about his connection, activities, and plans in the network from the beginning until his arrest by Angkar." End of quote. Were these the reports you were referring to in your testimony, the summaries or reports on confessions that would refer to the use of torture?
Thank you. These documents are evidence to support my testimony. The one who annotated about this torture was done later. I mean, the annotation was instructed by me to be done later. And it was not my idea. The idea came from probably Sun Sen, who instructed me to order the annotation putting down on the document. So this is related to the torture that I already told to the investigating judge during the investigation stage. The physical torture was inevitable. There was only one case that physical torture was not used. Most of the cases during the interrogation, it involved the use of physical torture. it was probably the order came from Sun Sen, who told me that you needed to instructed the interrogators to use it.
The summary reports that appear at the start of these confessions that reference the use of torture, who wrote those summary reports in the two documents that I gave to you? Who wrote the reports that describe the use of torture?
Poi Sien.
Poi Sien Poi alias Sien were interrogated by two people, Comrade Hong and Comrade Sein. So the summary report was made by Comrade Hong and Comrade Sein.
Hơi Chmua Nhâm Sâm Hào Sâu Phùng Phiệt Cảnh Đào.
For Nyamsum Elisot from the central zone, there were three interrogators, Comrade Eun, Comrade Khon, and Comrade Sein. There were two interrogators, Comrade Sein and Comrade Eun. For another comrade, he was the team leader.
And these summaries of the interrogations, were they part of the documents that you sent to your superiors?
As far as I can remember, I sent this document together with the confession report to the superior because there was an annotation by Brother Son Sen to Brother Nguyen for a copy. So it's clearly show that on this document there is an annotation by Brother Son Sen to Brother Nguyen. And I also sent the report of Sieng Pos alias Son to the superior because there is also an annotation by Son Sen, sent it to Brother Nguyen, dated 1977. So the two documents had the annotation intended for the document to be sent further to Brother Nguyen.
I'll come back to those annotations and we'll look at them on the screen, but for the moment, as I'm asking as a general practice, when you sent confession documents to your superiors, did they include these summaries from the interrogators that summarize the interrogation? Were those documents usually sent to the superiors as part of the documents they received?
At S21, the summary of the confession of prisoners was practiced once, but it took a lengthy time, so I stopped that practice. And I designated the work to Brother Nai, but it even took him slower than I did. So I use only very short, abbreviated annotation to accompany the document.
But I'm asking you about these very short summaries, like we see in these two documents. Were they sent to your superiors?
President, please hold on.
អរគុណ
Thank you. I sent all of them together. Anything that contain the annotation of Brother Son Sen, those documents must reach the hand of Brother Son Sen.
So let's now take a specific look at the annotations you were mentioning on the cover page of these two confessions. First on Nim Sim E3 1869. If we can show the cover page for E3 1869, the annotation on the screen. There's an annotation that reads, a central zone, one copy for Brother Nguyen, dated 11 November 1977.
President, co-prosecutor, could you please specify the zone again? Could you please specify the zone, the name of the zone? Because I did not receive it clearly through the interpretation.
The annotation, the translation I have states central zone, one copy for Brother Nguyen, 11/11/1977. Who wrote, do you recognize the handwriting of this annotation?
I object to this question, Mr. President. Good morning. Because it is inviting the witness to speculate, I would like to draw the Chamber's attention to E383. That's WRI from the witness. English page 00398-164, Khmer 00398-157, in which he says, and I quote, "However, it is only since I have had access to the case file that I have become aware of Son Sen's annotations and those of his superiors," end of quote. So here, very explicitly, the witness acknowledges that he has no idea until he saw the actual case file of who wrote which annotations and who sent which annotations to whom.
First of all, counsel is making an argument here. Second, he's completely misconstruing the evidence. The witness didn't see the annotations until later because they occurred after. But he was familiar with Son Sen's handwriting because he worked for him for a number of years. They exchanged documents. So the issue is whether the witness is familiar with the handwriting, not when it was that he saw this particular document. If he's familiar with the handwriting, he's competent, and we are certainly entitled to ask him, did he know Son Sen's handwriting? Does he recognize who wrote this annotation?
President, the chamber overruled the objection by the defense counsel, and the chamber is also interested to hear the answer from the witness. So I instructed the witness to give the answer to the question from the co-prosecution.
So do you recognize the handwriting that appears on the cover page of Noom Sim's confession?
I have seen this handwriting for many years, but I cannot recall when it was that I saw it for the first time. What I can tell you is that I am familiar with this handwriting, and I recognize that this handwriting belonged to Brother Son Sen.
And I'm not talking about this specific document here. In general, did you receive documents from Son Sen during the regime so that you could see his signature, his handwriting?
I would like to separate this into two. One, he wrote to me with some instructions. So I saw that handwriting with my eyes. For example, a letter that I sent to him, and then he replied to me on the 5th of October 1977. So that was his own handwriting. And then I ordered someone to typewrite it in order to inform the interrogator not to beat up the prisoner so hard during the interrogation. And another one is during the investigation stage of this court. As I said earlier, the annotation or writing from Brother Son Sen to me, I have seen this kind of documents for many years. And for Kun Kien's confession, I saw it later on during the period when Dunlop and Netire showed the document to me, and then I became to realize that the annotation on Kun Kien's document was the handwriting of Brother Nguyen. So it was probably in April 1999 when I was presented the document. So some of the documents I saw later on, but I would like to confirm or clarify that those documents, I saw them before the investigation stage of my case. And as I said earlier, I want to confirm that I am very familiar, or I recognize this handwriting long time ago.
And again, focusing on the period of the regime when you were the chairman of S21 and you would send confessions or other materials to Son Sen, how often would he send you back documents with handwritten instructions or comments on the confession?
The confession from the enemy, which were sent to Brother Son Sen, I rarely received his returned. Most of the time, I receive his feedback through phone call. For example, related to the confession by Koi Thun, and then he called me and told me that only the third confession of Koi Thun reflected the truth. I remember I received only one reply in writing from him only one time, when I reported to him that interrogator mostly use physical torture to interrogate prisoners. And then he wrote back by instructing me to inform the interrogators that they should not use too severe physical torture to inflict on the prisoners.
During the time you reported to Son Sen, how often would you meet with him? How often would you receive documents from Son Sen?
I and Son Sen talk to each other almost every evening through phone call. And we talk at least for 1 hour every day. And as I told you, phone call conversation was a very good strategy for us to discuss, because it could keep our secrecy. And he asked me on many things through that phone conversation. And each time during our conversation, we focus on some of the agendas, and then I relayed his instruction to my subordinates. And the location that I met Son Sen, it was in the map that I presented to the investigating judge with the letter B. Is located somewhere near Borai Kaila. And when Son Sen asked me to meet him, I usually went to meet him there. And each time I met him, we did not spend too much time. It took just around half an hour. And some of the documents about the confession of the prisoner with the annotation of Brother Son Sen, I saw those documents only in 1999.
Okay, we'll come back later, and I'm going to show you some of the documents that have questions directed to you by Son Sen. What I want to focus on now, the annotations on these two confessions. The Nim Sim confession. Can you read for us the annotation that's dated 11 November 1977 that appears on the cover of this confession?
Thank you. Let me read the annotation by Brother Son Sen. Central Zone. To Brother Nguyen, 1 copy. 11/11/77. So this is Son Sen's annotation to confirm that this document had already been sent to Brother Nguyen.
And if you could look at the cover page of the other confession, E3 1894. This is the confession of Sing Hoi. Do you recognize the handwriting of either of the annotations that appear on that page? And may we show that on the screen? Do you recognize, let's start with the annotation that appears above the box. Do you recognize whose handwriting that is?
The document shown to me included a box with a red line, so the previous document was not indicated in a red box. And I would like to read as the follow. Sent to Brother Nguyen, 2 copies, 9/11/77, and in the below box, Northwest. The annotation was put down by Sun Sen.
Let me just ask you, just so we're clear, the annotation that appears to the left of the box, is that also Sun Sen's handwriting, or is that someone else's handwriting?
I could recognize it very well. Annotation in the left margin belongs to Sun Sen. Mic is not activated, co-prosecutor.
Thank you. I want to also ask you about a reference that appears in one of the S21 notebooks that's in the yellow binder we gave you yesterday. This is the notebook entitled Statistics List, document E38368, E38368, Khmer ERN 00007470 through 71, French ERN 0027875 through 760, English ERN 00225 And I can read it to you, Mr. Witness, but if you're looking for the Khmer page, it is, again, 00007470, just 71, 7471. This is in a section of the notes, section 4, which is titled Views and Stances on the Enemy's Confessions. Paragraph 2, and describing the process of preparing the confessions. The notes say this, if you can listen to me. Quote, in summary, whatever we do not want to surprise ourselves. And then when the upper echelon reads our reports, they will not be surprised either. End of quote. And then continuing at Khmer, on Khmer page 00007480, English 0022541, French 002787646 The notes say on this page, quote, on the documents which we have the enemy write, the names must be clear. The day, month, and year must be clear. On plans, who do they receive them from? When the confession is finished, request a summary response. End of quote. So the notes of this interrogator talk about summaries, and they talk about, make reference to when the upper echelon reads our reports. Were the interrogators informed that they had to be careful in preparing their confession documents because they would be reviewed by the upper echelon? That's my question for you. And I see you're having trouble finding the pages. During the next break, what we'll do is we'll take the book and we'll mark pages that I want you to look at. So if you could just put the book aside for now. My question is, there's references in this notebook to being careful so that when the upper echelon reads our reports, they're not surprised. Were your interrogators instructed to be careful in writing their reports and confessions because they were going to be sent to the upper echelon?
Thank you, Mr. Co-Prosecutor. I provided the training sessions and also I gave general instructions that we had to be responsible before the party in terms of our reports. So we had to be clear about the enemies and friends. That was my instruction. So everyone was aware that the confessions of prisoners would be sent up the line. That was the task performed by S21, the main task, an important one. That is one issue. And concerning the confessions sent up the line, as I said, interrogators, those who were responsible for drawing up or compiling the confession, be responsible.
Okay.
President, it is now break time. The court will take a short break from now to 10:30. Court officer, please assist the witness in the waiting room for this witness and invite the witness back into the courtroom at 10:30.